Part 2 with Clarke.
How important do you think it's been that we've had this spread of all of the wine from the New World regions? And you've mentioned some of them then, but there's been this huge surge in the last sort of 30 years. How important has that been for the industry?
100% important. The industry could never have got where it's got without that. I think the point is that there was no will to modernize Spain, modernize Italy, modernize France above all. The only modernizing going on in France was Beaujolais Nouveau. And I think Joseph Berkman and Georges Duboeuf were of enormously great importance. And they went along with people like Clement Freud. There were just, I think, even the Roux brothers at Gavroche. There were just a bunch of people who really thought Beaujolais Nouveau was an exciting kind of way forward to try and popularize wine. And after all, in November, all those years ago, November in, Mrs. Thatcher's England was a pretty miserable time. And the weather was far worse in those days. And if you could have one more party in November before the awful 4-5 month long winter really kicked in until about April, well, for God's sake, let's have it. And we used to, Beaujolais Nouveau Day was a wonderful day because you'd get up at about 4 a.m. and start heading down to one or two of the club places like Don Hewittson's bars in London, like Champers and Cork and Bottle and these places. Everyone started they had breakfast parties. There were tastings in the Times and the Telegraph and the Express about all the bottles as they arrived would turn up at our newspaper office, and we had to make reports of them so that they got into the next day's newspapers. We matched them. The best Beaujolais Nouveau of the year is this, followed by this top 50 Beaujolais Nouveaux. 2 pages in the middle of a magnificent broadsheet paper. But that was the only attempt to make wine basically available and popular and attractive to the vast population. Otherwise, the wine was a world of a tiny amount of elitist wine, some of which was excellent, some of which was grossly overrated, and a relatively small amount of real rubbish, which was sold to ordinary people, as it were, for ordinary experiences. And it's the kind of wine that it's about what they deserve kind of thing, not the kind of wine that was ever drunk by the directors of these companies. So the idea of populist wine world was going nowhere. Also, they all had foreign names. Now, what the Australians did brilliantly was, well, 2 or 3 things. Firstly, they like drinking in Australia. So they make drink that's good to drink. And basically, if it's no bloody good to drink, I won't bloody drink it. You can't bloody sell it. You go past, make a decent piece of grog, a glass of grog, and I'll buy it. And charge me the right price and make it understandable, I'll buy it. And that's what happened. You had these. I remember in those early days, I was at a wine tasting at Olympia, one of the early London wine fairs or something like that. And I'd just done about 50 pretty terrible Côte d'Arones or something like that. And this sort of hairy, sweaty, khaki covered bearded bloke sort of turned up to me and he sort of said, hey, and you could smell him coming. You just thought, you and soap don't have a good relationship, do you? And I think he was wearing one of those nylon shirts. Nylon shirts, once they get sweat in them, you can never get the smell out. Incinerate them. Well, he hadn't incinerated his shirt, and he should have done. And he said, yeah, just a moment, Meg. And I was trying to say, really, I don't like the smell, and I wish I'm working. I'm busy. I was trying to be rude, And he said, no, don't come the raw prawn with me. He said, just a minute, mate. I said, all right, what is it? And he said, what you bloody pums, what kind of flavours do you like in your wine? And I went, well, I don't know. Red wines, we'd like them to taste like, black currants, something like that. Oh yeah, and what about the white wines? I said, peaches, nectarines, peaches, honey, something like that. No, really, I am busy, okay. Yeah, all right. And he wandered off. A year later, I was at the London Wine Trade Fair again, tasting, I'd done 50 muscadets or something, stuff which is pretty poor, and sulphur coming out of my ears. And I suddenly thought, hang on, that's a smell I recognise. And I turned around, here was Mr. Hairy Khaki nylon shirt turning up again. And he said, here, taste it. And I tasted this glass of red wine. I said, bloody hell, that tastes of blackcurrants. He said, yeah, that's what you said you liked. I said, how much is this? He said, £3.99. That's what you said you wanted to pay. I went, bloody hell. And he said, I've got some white here. And I said, that tastes of peaches. He said, yeah, that's what you said you liked. I said, how much is it? He said, £3.99. That's what you said you wanted to pay. And this was just a little microcosm, this hair. And he must have gone back down to Australia after meeting me first time. And he said, I've just been up the bloody Poms and they're whinging away as usual. He said, but they say they want their black currants to taste of, their red wines to taste of black currants, their white wines to taste of peaches, and they want to pay £3.99. So let's go and bloody make it. And a year later, he did it. And when you put that on to what Penfolds were doing and what Lindemans were doing and what Hardy's and Rosemount, all of these people had the same attitude in those days. Let's over-deliver. And they had a wonderful woman called Hazel Murphy who was in charge of the Australian wine business over here. And she banged the drum all the time. Never take the audience for a ride. Always over-deliver. Never go too cheap. Always go a reasonable price, but you're giving them far more than they've paid for. Always believe in yourself. Always give the consumer something which puts a smile on their face. And they did it by being, the wines were ripe. They used to call Australian wines sunshine in a bottle. Now everyone derides it. Yes, just silly old sunshine in a bottle. Hey, 40 years ago, sunshine in a bottle was non-existent in Europe. You didn't get it from the sunny places like Spain or the sunny places like Italy. They didn't give you sunshine in a bottle. They gave you dishwater in a bottle. You got sunshine in a bottle from the bloody Aussies, these bloody irritating, curmudgeonly, boorish old bastards down there called Australians. They came and said, okay, we're going to give a good flavour. What do we call it? Oh, something simple. The grape variety. The Chardonnay. We'll call it Chardonnay. And we'll call the red one Shiraz. And they'll get it, you know. You like the no? It's called Shiraz. What? It's called Shiraz. So what's it called? Shiraz. Oh, I think I've got that now. Shiraz. Okay. Is that what your wine's called? Yeah. Mine and his and his and his and his and hers and his and his. Shiraz. Okay. It comes from Australia. It's called Shiraz, and I like it. The flavour's lovely and ripe. And anything else? Yeah, my name's Smith. So it's called Mr. Smith, Shiraz, Australia. Mr. Smith, Chardonnay, Australia. There it is. You can understand that. We say, well, yes, we can. Why isn't it called Gumpelskirchner, Gewürztraminer, Säugerabfüllung, Winzer Genossenschaft? I haven't understood a word of what you said. Why isn't it called Shadow, this, that, and the other Premier Deuxième? Look, my name's Smith. These are my grapes, Chardonnay. Yeah, it's from Australia.
So a straight talking Aussie man making straight talking wines for consumer, essentially.
In a straight label.
Yes.
So
exactly.
everybody knew what they were getting. It was a revelation, and it was. I mean, God bless the Aussies, and then the New Zealanders, the Californians could have had it as well. The trouble is they were actually here slightly before the Aussies were. But they made that terrible mistake of starting out well with brands which we now forgotten about, things like Christian Brothers and Paul Masson and those sort of brands, which mean nothing now. They were big then, and the dollar went against the price, so they immediately, virtually doubled the price of their wine in 12 months. And of course, we all just stopped drinking it. That happened with Muscadet. Everyone in Britain drank Muscadet in the 1990s, up to the 1990s. In 1991, they had a bad frost, and instead of saying, we're going to have to wear this, sorry fellas, we've got to put the price up a bit. We've had a terrible frost, but bear with us. They just doubled the price, and we stopped drinking Muscadet like that. Just at the time when Australian Chardonnay was taking hold, just at the time when the first New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs had started coming onto the market. So Muscadet, which wasn't such a good wine anyway, it's much better now, But not only was it not such good wine, but better alternatives, which people could understand and immediately get the image of, were widely available. And it meant that Gillian and I could do the job. We needed heroes, and our heroes were grape variety, the wines labeled by the grape variety. And people now again say, oh, what about terroir? What about terroir? That's fine. Terroir, this whole thing of the wine's got a taste of where it comes from. Well, hey, Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc tastes of where it comes from. Barossa Valley Shiraz tastes of where it comes from. Because if you make a Sauvignon Blanc, which isn't somewhere like Marlborough, it tastes different. But the old timers and the fuddy-duddies love to say, oh, it doesn't taste of anywhere. And I like saying, well, you say that New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc doesn't taste of anywhere. That's because it tastes of a somewhere that never existed before. It's not, it doesn't taste of anywhere. It tastes of somewhere you can't conceive of.
It's new to them.
It's new.
Yeah.
And it's thrilling, and it makes your mouth pop, and you don't need any kind of wine knowledge to say, bloody hell, that's a decent glass of wine. And that's what Australian Shiraz did. That's what Chilean Merlot did. That's what New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc did. And since then, of course, the New World has learnt more about wine from the Old World. Normally at the upper end, they didn't need any help at the bottom end, but the Old World badly needed help at the bottom end. And the Old World of wine, it's the quality that comes through now at the lower end, the affordable end, was transformed by what the Australians knew and what the New Zealanders knew, and later on what the Californians and South Africans knew. New World completely transformed the world of basic wine in Europe, and the Old World has cautiously given back by saying, actually, if you come and visit us, we'll show you how to make your top wines better. It's been a good symbiosis. And I was lucky to ride on that fabulous bucking stallion of excitement, which was the beginning of the New World craze, the beginning of a new wave of wine, which was based absolutely on making Britain a wine drinking country. So that about 10 years ago, I think it was, they reckon that 85% of people in Britain drank wine. In the end of the 1960s, 5%. Now, the wine world is full of excitement at every level. You can be very excited about wine by going down to Tesco, and even if you go down to Tesco and Aldi and get a £5 bottle of wine, it's still a decent glass of wine now, which you and I wouldn't mind drinking. But you can also, the places you can get the top end of wine now. Every country has got a top end, and most of those top ends are really exciting, whether it be Greece or Romania or Spain or Italy or dozens of places of France or Austria or England. All of these places have now got pyramid of excitement, making the modern world of wine quite definitely the best world of wine that we've ever had to live in.
Yeah, well, it's good because it's by opening up the world of wine and introducing people to all these different grape varieties that they wouldn't have done previously. It's allowed people to essentially invest in the wines. They're buying more wines. It's just going back to the producers, and they're exploring more, and then more wine is being made. And I think it's, as you said, it's been a very good thing to allow that to spread for more people.
Well, you've got to drink. If you're going to improve your wine world, you've got to have more people drinking wine.
Yeah, exactly.
One of our problems at the moment is with Generation Z coming along. There is a certain element of anti-wineness around at the moment, but it's also partly anti-alcohol. And that's a generational thing. The world of wine, everything in the world is a pendulum, right to left, isolationist, integrationalist, politics, social activities, and at the moment, we are in a slightly puritanical world. And I'm not surprised that the way that the world has behaved so badly in the last 10 or 15 years, the way politics has let us down so badly again and again in different countries in the last 10 or 15 years. There are two ways of doing it. You either become more indulgent and you end up a sort of a Weimar Republic kind of world, or you become less indulgent. And at the moment, because 10 or 15 years ago, we were in a much more indulgent frame of mind. And even with things like the big financial crisis in 2007, 8, 9, 10, part of the way we weathered that was by saying, we'll keep partying. 10 years later, that hasn't worked. And people are not partying, and things like the cost of living crisis really is hitting. But also, it's also those other things like that, the sort of perfect storm of social discontent, which came in with things like Me Too, came in with things like Black Lives Matter. All those movements started coming together around the time of COVID, around the time of enormous social dislocation and dysfunction, and they have caught the minds of a generation which is actually caring a lot more about those kind of issues than the generation before did. And part of that is wellness, and part of that is being in control. After all, the sort of Generation Zers, people in their 20s say, who like wine, they're prepared to pay properly for good wine. But they make more demands. And quite a lot of them say, actually, alcohol doesn't do it for me. There is a significant chance for people making really good non-alcoholic drinks at the moment. And I would like people to follow more things like the kombucha world, or the sparkling teas and all these other sorts of worlds, or indeed teas themselves, rather than de-alcoholized wines, which I've so far, I mean, you can make lower alcohol wine and it tastes pretty good still. I haven't yet had a de-alcoholized wine which had much resemblance to wine, or which I would particularly want to have a glass of. There are hundreds of good non-alcoholic drinks. De-alcoholized wine basically isn't one of them.
Well, alcohol gives wine a certain amount of body, doesn't it? In
Texture, body, flavour, all those things. More than with beer, the brewers have done a pretty good job of getting sort of 60 or 70% of the texture and flavour and experience of a decent bottle of beer. Not a great beer, but a good beer that we would happily have a pint or two of in the pub. You can do that fairly well now at sort of 0.5%. They say that the difference between 0 and 0.5 is still considerable, because that little bit of alcohol just allows certain fundamental flavors and textures to start changing. As they say, when they're making sparkling, liqueur muscats in Australia, for instance, some of the people, they only actually allow the yeasts to just begin their work, and then they take it off and fortify it, because they say you've just got to allow the yeast to start those microbial bacterial changes, which will mean they don't have to make much alcohol. They probably make half a degree of alcohol, but they will fundamentally change the flavor from a simple mistella into something much more exciting and winey, and you hardly had to let them ferment at all. So 0.5, people say, is a lot better than 0.0. And certainly there are breweries which at 1 degree alcohol, 1% alcohol, 2% alcohol, make really nice beer.
Oh, so you've made many interesting comments over the years relating to wine throughout your career, and I'd just like to talk to you about a couple. I'm going to make sure I get this quote right. So, I think flavour is one of the overriding attractions of being alive, and wine is part of it. Can you tell me more what you mean by that? I mean, how have you packed? There's got to be a lot packed into that.
It's probably to do with the fact that we eat to survive, we drink to survive, we breathe to survive. Now, all three of these things are infinitely involved with scent, smell, and flavour. By flavour, I don't just mean that what your tongue can pick up. I mean the whole world of flavour and perfumes and scents. Well, the tongue, I'm sure you guys know, the tongue literally can only do salt, sweetness, acid and bitterness, and maybe umami for those who get umami. Whereas every single thing about what we think we taste in our mouth is actually the molecules of air, molecules of flavour coming up into our nasal cavity, all that kind of stuff. So certainly the scent, it's our original sense. It's the one that's most closely related to emotion. It's the one that's most closely related to memory and spontaneous response to things. It's also the one we use least probably nowadays, our sense of smell. So in a way, it is poorly used by humans because we don't really need it in the same way. The sense of sight has almost taken over for bipeds wandering around the place. The easiest thing to find out what I need, where my mate will be, where the food is, where my predator is the sense of sight. But flavor, I think the point is, flavor is so important to me because I can enjoy flavor, and I certainly experience flavor. Everything I do from the time I wake up in the morning, the first glass of water I have in the morning, I always taste it. Always taste it to see what the water's tasting like in the morning, or to see how my palate is working that day, because your palate doesn't always work well. I sometimes have to do 3 weeks tasting of, say, the International Wine Challenge, 3 weeks in a row. My palate's not at the same level every day, any more than someone going to play football for Chelsea or Arsenal. They won't play the same every day. That some days they'll just get it, and some days they'll just be half a second off. Same with our palates. I test my palate all the time. I tell any water I have, anything I eat, any milk I drink, anything of those, I'm tasting. And for me, that is an endless delight, to be honest. And it's one of the reasons why I think that people should spend more time caring about flavor, because it's an ability to get involved with our senses, which is endlessly available to us all the time. This mouth experience, or whatever they call it, the hot drink experience, the liquid in your throat experience, all these marketing people talk about all this stuff. People are always putting stuff in their mouth, and most of the time they're probably not thinking about what it tastes like, which is a great pity, because if you think about it, it can endlessly make your day more alive all the time. And I think that to not use your sense of smell and your sense of taste is to miss out on one of the easiest ways to understand the sheer pleasure of the human existence.
Well, you're right, because you're getting so much more from the human experience, as you just said. If you're able to really pursue the input that you're getting from whatever drink, from the scenery, from everything, it really does.
3 meals a day, all those cups of coffee, all those times you sip something, or technically, if you're a smoker, all the times you smoke, when you go out in the country, all the things that you smell around you. These are things it's part of the joy of being a human being alive, and I think that those who can should take it seriously, because it's part of the joy of being alive.
It's a good pursuit. So the second quote, Oz, that I'd like to get you to unpack a bit for me is, I don't think you're going to do much good at wine if you're not a hedonist. So why do you think you need to be a hedonist to enjoy wine?
I think because wine is completely unnecessary. It is absolutely an indulgence. It's unnecessary for us. It was necessary for olden societies in play as a way of preserving fruit. You can make a crop which will last for months, which is very important in terms of providing vitamins and all these other sorts of things through the months, but not anymore. In our modern supermarket-y kind of society, wine is absolutely an unnecessary indulgence. And I think a lot of wine so-called experts seem to think of it more in rather tight intellectual, academic, and competitive terms. A lot of wine geeks get very competitive about wines. It's almost sort of mine's bigger than yours kind of world. And I think that the only way to really enjoy wine is to, by all means, and I take wine tasting very seriously and do concentrate very hard and try to get my notes right and accurate. But then I like to just let go and preferably swallow the stuff. A lot of wine tasting, you think, have you ever swallowed any wine in your life? You always spit everything out. And come on, smile. You want to say something nice to wine tasters. You see them. Can I just ask you one thing? Please smile.
Yeah.
Please smile. Your brain reacts to a smile. I've worked this out when I'm at the gym and when I'm running. When I'm running around a track, if I can keep a smile on my face, I do a better time. And I believe it's because the brain, if I'm like that, the brain thinks I'm upset. I'm smiling now, and you wouldn't have known it, but that wasn't a smile. But this kind of smile looks a bit forced, but the brain is reacting and saying, he seems to be happy. The endorphins flow a bit more. You do stuff better. If you smile when you're wine tasting, it's one of the reasons why it's nice to talk to people about wine tasting. I do a lot of wine tasting in a sort of solitary way, but my best notes are normally, well, there are two. Either I sit at my desk for about 2 hours like a tortured poet trying to work out what to say, or I come back from a tasting having met several nice people who are all prepared to chat, and each of them had ideas, and I thought, that's it, yes, that's it, and that leads on to this, and suddenly I've got it. Suddenly I've got the wine. And I think that understanding wine, if it's just a liquid in a test tube, I don't think you ever really understand it. I think you should, try to understand it as it's an intoxicant. It makes you feel better. So it's supposed to, and you should accept that. You should be aware that it can make you feel rather better than you expected, and if you're in a wine tasting, that's not a great idea. But in life in general, why not? I think that it's something which is endlessly variable, and it's variable with your mood all the time. It'll on the whole make your mood better. It'll on the whole facilitate you being happier with your friends. It'll on the whole make your day a happier day if you take it as an indulgence. If you take a slightly hedonic or hedonistic approach to it, saying, okay, I understand this wine, but my chief objective is to enjoy it. That's why actually when you go to these big, well, I don't get invited to many of them, but I do occasionally, these very smart dinners where there's 20 or 30 vintages of a wine all set out, and you get so little wine in your glass you couldn't drown a tadpole in it. And you think there's not even enough for a mouthful there, but you try and make a half mouthful into 2 mouthfuls just to think, and you make your notes and you think, there's a squidge left in the bottle. You think, I've just got to try it a bit more. And you think, Jesus, 30 more of those, and you think you've tasted maybe 50 vintages of wine or something like that, and you made your notes, but at the end of it, you just think, Jesus, I could do with a drink.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think I've always thought that actually, if you're going to really understanding a wine, you need the best part of a glass of it. And so, do that with half a dozen bottles of wine, with half a dozen friends, rather than 40 bottles of wine and 50 people. One's grateful to taste those wines, but it doesn't mean I really understand them. I just tasted them, made as accurate a note as I could. But actually, did that help me understand the property? Did it help me understand the people? Probably not. But say, just choose 6 of those wines instead of all of them. Give us enough wine in our glass to have a mouthful, to make some notes, then to swallow some, and then to talk to someone else, then have another bit of a swallow, maybe a bite of food, and then another swallow. And then you're starting to think, I think I get this.
Well, it's a good point you've raised there, because wine does evolve and it does change from the, particularly with older wines, once the bottle's been opened to being poured to being in your glass, and a bit of air gets to it. So as you said, if you're only having a very tiny bit from all these different vintages, you'd be missing out on so many properties of what could be a great wine.
Yeah. And there's not enough volume.
Yes.
I think you need a reasonable amount of volume. Otherwise, the oxygen is going to affect your wine much quicker. If you go to tasting sometimes, and the wines have all been poured out in front of you, they might have been poured out for an hour. And they're very smart, wonderful labels, worth tons of money. But they've been, a sort of sparrow spit has been poured into this bloody great Zalto or Riedel glass. And it's been there an hour. It's probably aged and changed that little tiny amount of wine as much as a decanter would age in 12 hours. It's probably had a brief peak and is on the way down. Quite often, you just think, I'm grateful, fellas. I am grateful for being invited, but I'm not having a lot of fun.
Because as you've said a number of times, I mean, wine is about it's the environment, it's enjoying with friends, it's consuming, and as you say, if you feel like it's almost being teased at you and you're not allowed to relax and enjoy the moment and therefore the wine, you'll be losing elements.
You're not allowed to relax because, I mean, there are a few people in this world who are completely happy with that world of chandeliers and sort of gilded people wandering around in smart clothes. I'm not one of them. I'm much happier sitting by the side of a river or sitting in a bar or a cafe or around a family table with half a dozen bottles open. That's the sort of world I'm much happier in. And, well, I think wine is there for drinking. I think wine is there for having fun. I think the wine is there for making your eyes shine, making your heart beat a bit faster, making you feel a bit more witty, a bit more attractive, a bit happier in your own skin. And if I can have great flavors with it, I'm delighted. But awful lot of the time, people say, I'm sorry, this isn't very good. And my feeling is, you're my friends. It's great. I'm not marking this.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make a note and saying, this is what I think about it. You're my friends. This is what you're offering me. I'm happy.
Well, as you say, it's the environment, it's atmosphere, and it's just being with people. I completely agree.
And drinking wine of its place is a good idea as well, because if you're somewhere, I don't want to drink wine from somewhere else. If I'm in a wine area, just saying, hey, I want what you have. No, but we've got some special wine. Leave it for someone else. I just want your stuff. And often, when I go on wine tasting trips, they don't want to serve me their basic cuvées, the basic stuff. They've lined up all the smart wine, and I'm saying, can I just taste your ordinary stuff? And you, no, I think we'll do. No, please. What are your basic releases? Please let me see your basic releases. And you can see them thinking, A, either we're not proud of them, we don't want him to see them, or because so many wine people are so keen on seeing the top end stuff all the time, it's an unusual request. And I just think, it's like le patron mange ici, the boss eats here. When those old fashioned restaurants, you see the boss eats here. In other words, I want what the boss eats. Give me I'm a great plat du jour bloke. The dish of the day, I'll have it. What is it? I don't mind. I'll have it anyway, because that's what you're eating and that's what I want to eat.
That's a good point, because what you're referring to is that they should be backing and supporting even the standard cuvée and saying, well, look, here we go. This is our wine. Give it a try. Yeah. I mean, it is natural for people to want to put their best show forward, particularly for somebody like yourself. But to start with, say, well, show me your cuvée. You know, what's a non-vintage like from you?
Yeah, and so often their top wine, it's not so much okay. In Champagne, say, the top wines are normally pretty smart. But in many red wine areas, the top wines are not so smart. They're made for American critics. They're made for the 95 points out of 100 brigade. And they taste like it. And you just think, this is a wine with no refreshing, savoury, mouth-watering qualities whatsoever. Why would I drink it?
Well, speaking of refreshing wines and exciting opportunities, the English wine industry is currently, well, you could say booming, or it's certainly doing well and gaining a lot of momentum.
Yeah.
What do you see as coming next for the industry? Where do you think we should?
I think there'll be a little bit of a readjustment this year because we've got in 2023-4, because we've probably got over 20 million bottles being made this year. And it's about time, because we've been pushing for the last 2 or 3 years at about 9-10 million bottles, which is it's been easy to handle. Some people have built up a few stocks, but on the whole, people have found it easy to handle. 2023, not only was it not particularly ripe, so we're going to find a lot of the still wines made from the classic varieties like Pinot Noir particularly, but also to some extent Pinot Meunier and Chardonnay, they may not be of the quality for still wine that people wanted. But they'll be fine for sparkling wine. But the trouble is, there'll be too much base wine there for sparkling wine for the market to absorb. I think that we've already seen 1 or 2 examples this year of people, and one can only presume that financially they thought, this is a bit harder than I thought, and there's been a bit of consolidation going on. I don't want the cost of properly made English sparkling wine to suddenly drop through the floor. I don't think it would be healthy, and I'm afraid there are 1 or 2 players in the English market who are trying to make that happen, and I really wish to God they weren't, because they'll drag a lot of people down with them, which of course is perhaps their objective. But I think that English sparkling wine is a boutique product on the whole. It's made in difficult conditions from much smaller yields with much less government support. And now that we're outside the EU, probably even more extra costs, which we otherwise could have been better absorbed in the EU. So I don't want it to suddenly become a cheaper wine. Also, it's high acid wine on the whole, and therefore it needs extra aging. If you're going to make it properly, and extra aging costs money. We've done a brilliant job of stating that English sparkling wine is world class. We've done a job that periodically is able to say we're as good as champagne, and I think there's no question we've got 50 producers in this country as good as champagne. Every year we have more. Sometimes we've been able to say actually we're even better than champagne, and at the price, I think we can be. I think that our good cuvee sparkling wines in that 30 to 40 pound market, I think they're better than most champagnes in 30 to 40 pound market. Champagne is surprisingly good at the low end, interesting enough, because it's got a good cooperative system, and often exceptionally good at the upper end. But I think the commercial middle end, I think England now, you put half a dozen so-called Grand Marque champagnes up against half a dozen similarly priced English wines, I think the English wines would usually come out as better wines. I think that we are now in a situation whereby the English are proud of their wines. They're not saying, oh God, it's English. No, you would never see me dead. I mean, 10 years ago, you might say, oh, English. No, of course I wouldn't dream of drinking that. And 5 or 6 years ago, they might say, oh, is that English? Good gracious. Much, much better than I thought. And literally, about 3 or 4 years ago, when the 2018s were coming onto the market, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, people were starting to say, this is English, and isn't it good? And it's the change in our attitude to English wine is literally 5 years old. It's not 20 years old. It's 5 years old. That people all around are proud of English wine now, and it's something which has happened so fast and with such excitement. I am concerned that people will try and cheapen it, and people will try and abuse it and take advantage of it. It's a thrilling in a really tough time for our country, and we haven't had good times in this country for over a decade now. And in these tough times, English wine has been a shining light, and I really don't want people to besmirch it. I want it to be good. I want it to be properly priced. And I want everyone in every county that can do it to say, we have our own wines. We want to drink our local wine. We want to take you to our vineyard. This is our vineyard. This is our local pub, and they serve our local wine. All those sorts of things. The local thing, COVID has made a big difference on that. Brexit has meant we have to start looking for ourselves. We have, since the government has decided that we will rudely cut ourselves off from the people who do most business with us and were most prepared to be our friends. Well, if they've decided that for us, we have to look after ourselves. And one of the ways to do it is to, if you have a greengrocer, support that greengrocer. If you have a baker, buy your bread from that baker. If you've got a local brewer, buy their beer rather than an international brand. And obviously, if you've got a winemaker and you want some wine, please give your local vineyard, your local winery a go. And the probability is, if you believe in your community, if you believe that communities must make a living to survive, otherwise they just become ghost towns. If you help your community make a living, you come from Salcombe. That's a good example of a community which is, it is being helped to be a proper community by the excellent food and drink stuff that Salcombe is producing. But if the people in Salcombe don't support it, you will significantly lose a part of your community, and you'll become more and more just a rather sad ghost town as against a vibrant community. So, that, I think people have really got that very well. I think that cost of living crisis is making giving a real challenge, and it's everything. Everywhere I go, I can't believe the way prices have gone. Just simply walking out to the local co-op or the local Aldi or the local Sainsbury's, you just think, bloody hell, is that really what the price of things is? It is really affecting people. I think it's really affecting people's ability to spend big on wine, because it is not a necessary indulgence. You can always go and get a cheap bottle of red, a cheap bottle of white, and if you want, a cheap bottle of fizz. You may not like it so much, but it is there. English wine is not the cheap this, the cheap that. English wine is the proud, self-confident, homegrown wine of good quality at the very least, and excellent quality at the top. I think the next couple of years are going to be difficult.
Yeah, it will be, won't it?
I think they're going to be difficult. I think that we can't suddenly drink another 10 million bottles of wine, nor can we suddenly export another 10 million bottles of wine.
Well, it's going to be storing as well, isn't it? It's a large space to suddenly have.
Yeah, so a lot of people couldn't get their grapes processed this year. The contract growers, the contract winemakers, well, people were coming up with tons and tons of extra grapes. They say, well, can you please make 6 tons for me? They come with 10. And the guy's saying, we can't process. We haven't got enough tanks. We've got contracts to make all these things. We can't take your extra grapes. People with new vineyards not picking the grapes. Imagine what that's like. You've invested all this money, and 2023 comes along, and you actually can't pick your grapes because you can't find anybody to buy them. And if you have managed to make your wine, all the extra tanks you might have had to buy. This has happened before. This happened in 2014. People suddenly got excited about volume and didn't have enough. 2018, when that suddenly came in at 12, 13 million bottles, people were scurrying around for tanks just to try and have somewhere to store their wine. 2023 is a lot more devastating than 2018. There is genuinely, we have doubled our wine production from last year, and last year we were already making more than we were drinking.
It's as you said, I've been touching on a couple of important facts there. It's the storage issue, because that's a big thing in wine. Where's it all going to go? And particularly if the consumer hasn't fully come round to the idea of English wine, it is building to a head. It's very cool.
It really is. Yeah, and the British consumer is working fast towards English wine, but I suspect out of our 60 million people, if you said, okay, how many of you have tried English wine? It's probably still in single figure millions.
Okay. Oh, so I wanted to talk to you about a couple of your books. So you've published, a number of books throughout your career, and most recently you've got the two titles: English Wine, From Still to Sparkling, the newest New World wine country, and then also your most recent book is Clarke's Story of Wine: 8,000 Years, 1,000 Bottles. Can you talk to me about the inspiration behind your two most recent releases?
The English book, I just felt it had to be written because there wasn't a popular book on English wine. There was Stephen Skelton's stuff, which is very good, and I read it enthusiastically. In it's rather more scientific, rather more what do you call it? Professional approach to wine. But there was nothing which took the whole world of English wine by the horns, didn't tell all the stories, didn't tell all the history, didn't go into all the details, but did actually say to people, there's a wonderful experience out there, and I'm going to give you 100 examples, and I'm going to tell the tales of Essex, and tell the tales of Sussex and Kent, and the West Country, and Yorkshire, and God knows, and the people I've met, and the kind of wines that they're good. And please, buy the wine, try it, go and visit your vineyard. It's a book which is basically saying, take pride in this wonderful English and Welsh world of wine that we've got. Take pride in it, take control of it, take possession of it. Possess your local vineyard. Make it part of you. And if I can write in an enthusiastic way to make you think, I've really got to go and see that guy near Abergavenny, or that chap, those people near Winchester, I really have to go and see them. I only live 5 miles away. I must go and visit them. Or if I'm in a Majestic or a Waitrose or whatever, for goodness sake, I could be buying champagne now. No, I won't. I'm going to make the leap. I'm going to try some English wine. Oh, I know where that is. That's that place just down the M3. You can, so that's the vineyard. Wow, I saw it in the car 2 weeks ago. All of those kind of things. I wanted to give an enthusiastic commentary on where we are and where we're going. And I think it's the kind of wine book that I will need to update every 2 or 3 years. And I think I should. And so it was really, I felt, a book whose time had come, needed to be written. And I hope it will bring more stuff on. Well, I mean, you've got people like Henry Jeffries' book, Vines in a Cold Climate. Is that, Vines in a Cold Climate? You've read that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, well, it's a very good book, but much deeper and denser than mine. Mine's not supposed to be deep and dense. Mine's supposed to be exhilarating and amusing and informative and encouraging. So that's why it's there. And the story of wine, well, this is this whole idea of thinking it's not the story of wine, it's a story of wine. It's my story of wine, of things I want to talk about. Lots of important things are not there. Lots of dull things are not there. If something's important but dull, it doesn't get in. I'm not going to write about it. You know, but I do want to talk about the legends of wine and where wine came from. And I talk about that. I talk about the Mesopotamians and the Assyrians and the Hittites and the Phoenicians and the Greeks and the Cypriots. But I try to talk about them all the time, saying, hey, here's some funny stuff and here's some informative stuff. And you won't believe what they used to do, rather than saying, in this year they did this, and in that year they did that. So if you want to read the book about saying, okay, I want to know about the first 7,000 years of wine, if you want to know all the details, then better find another book. But if you want to have a dozen entries which actually make you think, hey, I think I've got a feel for it. And I didn't know that Cleopatra was like that, and I had no idea that Tutankhamun was involved in that. And what on earth were those Greeks doing? Well, then that's what that book will give you. And it then obviously goes much more into the European, the sort of modern world of wine. So a significant amount of it is in the development of glass. when wine was invented, we didn't have any glass.
Yeah.
Glass is a relatively recent thing, but when we got glass, we didn't have decanters, and when we got decanters, we didn't have bottles, and when we had bottles, we didn't have glasses. All of these, and when we had glasses, we went back to much more modern bottles. We didn't have labels, and we didn't have corks, and we didn't have corkscrews. All of these things I've talked about to again try and always every single section I've done, and on the whole I've written them in a sort of 2-page spread, so that you've got 1, 2, or 3 photographs, as many photographs. With publishers, you always want more photographs and they always want less, but publishers say, I've got to pay for that. You say, yes, but it makes the book better. Please, please, please do it. But it's basically a 2-page spread. This is a nice little chat, and so it does about important things. It talks about Bordeaux, obviously. Why is Bordeaux important? Why is Burgundy important? How do you make champagne? Where did Chateauneuf du Pape from? Why is Rioja Rioja? Why is Chianti? All that stuff. But I'm much more interested, really, in the ins and outs. I love what Pasteur. Why is Pasteur important? He learned how to pasteurize milk, didn't he? Yeah, but actually, he made it possible to drink milk. He probably saved the French Republic from starving by showing how to stop milk, how to stop liquids and foods going off. Pasteurization, by heating them up, killing all the microbes and bacteria. But he also began to understand fermentation. And he created the science which has allowed us to understand how wine is made. And things like the malolactic fermentation, that wasn't really fully understood until about 40 years ago. 40, 50 years maybe. It was the Australians and Professor Payno in Bordeaux. So I talk about all that stuff, but I also talk about Blue Nun Liebfraumilch. And the wine geeks say, oh, why have you got that in? I say, because it's important. They say, oh, is it? Well, I say, do you like Matthews Rosé? Oh, no. Well, that's in. It's important. Do you like white, pink Zinfandel? Oh, no. Well, that's in, because that's important. Do you like Gallows Hearty Burgundy? Oh, no. Well, that's in, because that's important. It's basically, and New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is important, and Australian Chardonnay is important, and bag in box is important, and putting wine in cans is important, and all of these things which the wine geeks don't really get, because they don't drink Liebfraumilch and white Zinfandel and that kind of thing. But the majority of people have either come through that or are still drinking those sorts of wines. So I tell the stories of all of those as well, and I tell stories of, I don't know, prohibition. It's important. It's fascinating. What did Hitler drink? What were the Nazis doing in the Second World War? Really interesting. The First World War, the first and the second battles of the Marne, they were in the middle of the vineyards of Champagne. Really? Yeah. Reims was under siege for 4 long years. It started as a city with, I don't know, 200,000 or 300,000 people living there. It ended with the inhabitants of Reims at the end of the First World War were 1,000 or 2,000 people left out of 300,000. That's a story worth telling. And of course, going right forward, you talk about fraud, you talk about Rudy Kanayawan, you talk about forest fires, which in the last 5 years have become a massive thing. Smoke and forest fires. What's relevant about that? Really a lot, because all of the wines you're drinking in the next 12 months, quite a few of them will be affected by smoke. Now, do you like that flavor or don't you? You're going to have to get used to it, because that's what you're going to get. Global warming. What is global warming? Let's talk about it. In the UK, what can really happen? How far can we go in the UK? And then, obviously, because I keep my ear to the ground, the trends of orange wine, amber wine, the trends of biodynamism and organics, natural wine. What really is it? What does it mean? Is it a good idea? Is it not a good idea? All of that stuff. And I try to do it with a mixture of humor and information, enthusiasm to inform people, just trying to say, look, I'm having a chat. Do you want to join my chat? I mean, when I'm writing, I sit at my desk here in silence, and as I write everything longhand. So I've got, my book, the Oz Clarke on wine, which is also, one of the books I've come out with in the last couple of years. That's, 350,000 words, all written in longhand. Because I talk to myself as I write, and as I write, and if it doesn't sound right as I sort of articulate it as I'm writing, it's not going to read right. So I think, okay, no. And normally, as I begin, which means I only write one draft. I very rarely, in a 400 page book, I'll probably rewrite 10 pages. But I hum and haw and I fret and I sit around and I tear my hair out and I pick my nose and desperately fret about life, and bit by bit and I look at this A4, the blank sheet of paper, and it's blank and it's blank and it's blank and it's blank, and then I get going and then I might write 6, 8, 10,000 words without stopping, and it would have taken me from lunchtime to midnight. But it also took another 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, of things going around in your head. And rather than doing endless drafts, I just let them go around in my head and let them go around in my head. And it's good and bad. It means that I get a very conversationist style. It also means I miss stuff sometimes, and that I could have been more specific in some of my arguments. But the way that my brain and my heart and my voice were going just moved me away. I like being tangential when I'm writing. I like bouncing off subjects rather than always diving in. Sometimes I want to dive into the heart of it. Quite often bounce off it. I think it was André Gide who said that the secret of writing a good novel is never to mention the subject you're supposed to be talking about, which editors are not very keen on that. And they do say I'm impossible to edit as well. And part of the reason is that if I write 1,000 words, I want the first 10 words to relate to the last 10 words. And between the first 10 and the last 10 is a strand.
I think that's your artistic nature coming through.
Probably, yes. It's hard. Unfortunately, yes, probably it is.
I knew there'd be a lot there. Thank you so much for your time. It's thoroughly enjoyable. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I'd like to add cheers to you.
Oh,
and I've just about finished my glass of Greyfriars 2013 Blanc de Blanc. You've already started yours. But I thought we would have a glass of English sparkling wine, because I'm a great believer in its future. I think that it's one of the shining things for us to be proud of in this country at the moment. And Greyfriars is made by a chap who was at the same college as I was at university.